Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mediation and Beyond. Another candid conversation with Dr. Debra Dupree. And I'm really happy to have her here today because, as you know, with Mediation and Beyond, what we do is talk about things that matter, conversations that really are that matter in the world and that matter to each and every one of us, and that can have an impact. And so I invited Dr. Debra Dupree all the way from California to be on the show today because I really find what she has to say and offer is very insightful and I think very beneficial. So let me go ahead and introduce her. Dr. Debra Dupree represents the best of the best as an extraordinary family business mediator, international workshop trainer, and transformational keynote speaker. Known as the Mindset Doc. I love that. She strives to make a difference in the lives of people she touches by providing insight and vision for leveraging the mindset for new perspectives and opportunities when it comes to resolving conflict. As the founder and president of Relationships at Work, Inc., Dr. Debra combines her 30 years of experience in psychotherapy, mediation, conflict coaching, and leadership development to guide professionals in leveraging their mindset to resolve disputes differently and exquisitely. Her proprietary program for the Agile Lawyer, Mediator Life, is designed to help the traditional lawyer and mediator to move into the new world of tomorrow by leveraging science-based ways of thinking and doing for healthier, happier outcomes for all they touch. So thank you so much, Debra, for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Colleen. I'm really honored to be here and excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and you know, it's a well-needed conversation. And as I referenced to you earlier, one of the reasons I really wanted to have you come on is to help people understand the importance of mediation in the workplace. But however, before we get there, want to understand from therapist to mediator, how'd you make that transition?
Well, you know, it's a great and interesting question, quite honestly, Colleen, because quite honestly, it was never my goal to become a therapist. That sort of came along the way. Yeah. I actually had applied for my doctorate degree way back when after graduate school and was accepted. And my goal was to go into organizational psychology. And unfortunately, life happened for my mentor, and there were 5 of us that they could not take into the program. And so as sort of a negotiation standpoint, I said, well, let me do something else that will give me a license. And so that's how I actually got into the field of therapy, was through that. I was a career counselor. But you know, got into therapy and decided to pursue the licensing, but I've always had a love for the workplace, how employees get along, leaders and followers, and so I've used my counseling skills in that venue very actively, but also have a private practice as well.
Yeah, you know, I think really you spend half as much time of our lives, if not more, sometimes at work as we do at home. And so workplace environments become family. And so it really is all about the relationships that we build. How do you see mediation as being an asset, let's say, in the workplace environment? I believe it's an asset in the family, but so to me, that's just an extension of our family.
Yeah, I totally agree. Oftentimes we spend more time at work than we actually do with our own families. And so that's why I emphasize it's so important to build quality relationships and to get along because we are there day in and day out. And mediation, I feel, is an excellent vehicle to then help people navigate through their differences. You know, many times people get into conflict because they don't know how to do things differently. They tend to be very myopic, you know, in my way or the highway. And even if it's not that perspective, they are challenged in trying to look at things from others' perspectives. And mediation is I like to call it a guided conversation.
Yes, that's actually a beautiful way to put that. What are some of the trends you're seeing in the workplace right now?
Yeah, it's constantly changing. Let's say that, you know, one of my focal points, my niche markets for a long time has been in the area of disability management. And so with that, I've worked with employees with medical conditions and how employers can help accommodate them. So it's a form of mediation, facilitated dialogue. But I also, along the way, became very steeped in what we call Title VII protections under the federal law, coming out of the Civil Rights Act of '64. And so that's where, no discrimination, retaliation, hostile workplace environment, regarding race, ethnicity, age, gender, et cetera. And so disability is part of that. But I have long been trained in Title VII protections as well. And so many times, differences between people don't actually escalate to that level. However, they can, I don't want to say, get fostered at the relationship level. And so by intervening early enough, again, around differences, we can help manage things so that they don't escalate to such a formal level. And oftentimes it's really about, well, I will say that because of this comes more out of my mediation training than it did out of my psychology training, but I really focus a lot on communication styles, of which there are 4. And so I see a lot of differences erupt between people around these communication styles, because each has a different focal point, each has a different way of speaking, each has a different reaction to conflict. And so by studying and learning more about communication styles, that's where I feel I'm able to really help people discover and uncover some of the differences that naturally flare up, and help people to not take things so personally, but to recognize that these are just patterns of communication that exist worldwide.
And those patterns of communication are in the workplace and they're in the home.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not like we just leave them at the office and when we go home. And are these patterns of communication ones that you have developed or ones that are out there, Deborah?
No, they're very much established out there. We basically out of the 1940s, when our veterans were coming back from World War II, that's when the field of psychology really sort of exploded. Studying the effects of war, combat, trauma, injury on veterans, and that's where we really saw a lot of explosion in the field of psychology. Right. And so it was discovered that these 4 styles existed back then. It's just amazing. I find amazing to this day how few people actually still know about them, and how many people don't know about them. And yet it's an excellent tool for understanding differences as well as commonalities in relationships.
And just so we know for the audience, like, where could somebody go to just kind of take a little more deeper dive into the 4 areas? Is there a site that somebody could go to? Is it on your website? Like, where would somebody find that?
Yeah, well, I do invite people to visit my site, because I have developed, I have what I call 3 steps to mindset shift. And so 3 quick little assessments that I've developed or adapted from other sources. And, the first is around emotional intelligence. The second is what I call the spice game. After all, what makes food so good? The different spices. So what makes relationships so rich? The different spices. And around those 4 communication styles. And so people can go and take that on my website. Yeah. And get the results immediately. And that will be the first step. And there's a little video there, a little description. And then I also have what I call the animal game, or 5 approaches to conflict management. And so with that, then that's a foundation that I use to coach people around shifting the mindset. But another tool that I use, it's called the DISC, and that actually stands for the 4 communication styles. One is the driver, or the dominant kind of person. The other is more of the influencer, the more of the people-oriented social kind of being. The other is more of a steady, consistent, but very idea-oriented. And then the last is what we call conscientious, or more analytical, detail-oriented, things like that. And so that's another, if they Googled DISC, they can find that. But again, my website is relationships-at-work.com, and go into assessments, and they'll be able to take the 3 right there.
Well, awesome. I'll make sure that's in the details below after we're done. I wanted to ask you, do you believe that women have something inherently different than men do to offer the field of mediation? Or do you believe that it's more kind of an individual offering, let's say?
Yeah. That's a great question. As part of my studies and my work, I do a lot around gender differences.
Mhm.
And, and I just want to put out there a caveat is that when I'm sharing some of what I'm going to share with you, it's about generalities. Not all women are going to fit into this,
Yes.
not all men are going to fit into this, but there are some general trends, just like the communication styles.
Absolutely.
So females and males, and not just anatomically do we look different, but our brains actually are structured differently too. And women by nature tend to be more relationship focused. They tend to have a better sense of how people are impacted, how people are feeling, more in tune to what's going on for people. And not that men aren't, but men by nature tend to be more task oriented. And if you think back to the origins of humankind,
Yep.
males were always the hunters and the gatherers, always looking out there. What's happening? What can I go after? What's out there? So always out there, more of an outward focus. Whereas females, again, traditionally have been the nurturer, the childbearing. And so they were more centered about what's going on immediately and then making sure that the needs of people were being met. That's really no different today. I mean, we've evolved in a lot of ways, but those core features are still there. And so I always tell, particularly our male leaders, is that if you want to know what the pulse of the organization is, talk to one of your female colleagues. They'll have a good feel for it. Again, not all. Again, that's where I go back to the communication styles. And so if I can just share this with you, we're all part of the human race, right? Mm-hmm. And then the first differentiator that we can visibly see is, are we male or female? And even today, there's blurring of the lines. Yes. Okay. And then I say the next differentiator that we can pay attention to and use in how we manage our relationships is around those 4 communication styles. And right there, huge amounts of information available. And so when we talk about, the female perspective, again, females by nature tend to be more relationship oriented, not all. And so I think that they bring that awareness, that attunement to mediation in ways that are maybe not quite so readily available to males. Again, but it's all learnable. That's what
that was gonna be my next question. I'm like, but everything you own what you own about yourself, mm-hmm. right? But everything else you can bring in to grow, right? So that's the point of that. And what you're saying with the disc is that acknowledging where your strengths are and where you may need to grow in. That's the benefit of doing that kind of analysis about oneself, right?
Right. And I'll just elaborate on that too, is that we all have our natural communication styles. We tend to show up with 1 or 2 that are more dominant than the other 2, but we all have, in my 30 years of working with communication styles, I've never seen somebody who doesn't have a little bit of everything. Yeah. And so quite honestly, as we mature and as we, develop professionally, the ideal would be is that we actually bring out the other styles that may not be so strong, because now we have the tools to connect with anybody, depending upon where they're coming from. And so I like to use the platinum rule instead of the golden rule here, treat others as they would like to be treated. Okay. Yes. Because if I treat you the way I want to be treated, who's that about?
Right.
And so that's what we found, some 20, 30 years ago in the workplace. The golden rule is valuable, but when it comes to our close relationships, and I would say at home and at work, the golden rule doesn't quite cut it. It's a good guide for general living. Treat others as you would like to be treated, cordially, blah, blah, blah. But when we get to those close relationships, again, if I treat you the way I want to be treated, then that's about me. It's not about you at all. And that's sort of the ultimate form of disrespect. So in the workplace, we want to use the platinum rule. Again, treat others as they would like to be treated. And particularly as leaders, we then need to be aware of where people are coming from and pay attention.
Well, that's the other thing. If you want to treat people, if you want to go by the platinum rule and treat people, go treat people the way they want to be treated, you actually have to know how they'd like to be treated. Yeah. And therein lies the ability to have those conversations and to be aware, right? To be aware of who's working for you or who's in your space, and reading affect and all of that, which is really important to the workplace. I think that's fantastic. I've not heard it put that way, the platinum rule, but I am going to hang on to that little nugget for myself. That's actually really good. So thank you for sharing that. I want to also ask Deborah, so doing mediation, and you and I both doing mediation, we both have non-legal based backgrounds.
Mhm.
Do you think there's an advantage to working with somebody who's trying to do conflict resolution, let's say it's divorce or something, or even business that doesn't have that legal background? Do you think that people with different backgrounds bring different things to the field, and can it work?
Very good question. Yes. I have to acknowledge that when I entered the mediation field way back in the early 90s, that's how long I've been at this, almost 30 years, it was predominantly females in the work world. In fact, the legal market was not attuned to mediation back in those days, hardly at all. And but over the years, I definitely have seen it evolve. I used to train professionals around the country in workplace mediation back in the early 2000s. And again, our classes were more women than males. But we did start seeing an emerging market from attorneys. Usually tended to be attorneys who had had a lengthy career in litigation and were simply quite tired of the fight, and they wanted a calmer, more peaceful approach to how they did their business. And then over the next 10 or 15 years, then we totally saw the market, shift in terms of really being dominated by attorneys. And so not every conflict, not every dispute requires a legal background. And so it's not, because as a mediator, you're not applying the law. It's really more about subject matter expertise. And so, like, for example, one of the ones I found most interesting was somebody who had a background in antiquities, but there are a lot of disputes that come up, or artwork, and so they then parlayed their subject matter expertise in the art field by adding skills as a mediator. So then they had that subject matter expertise, but now they're using mediation skills, which is a process, which includes a set of skills.
Yes.
To help people with differences navigate through to a mutual outcome. And so I would share that in today's world, mediation is definitely dominated by the legal market. However, it's almost been hijacked to some degree, because in fact, I just was on a podcast with a colleague, Harold Coleman, that we said words matter. Because basically the legal market has brought in the courtroom lingo into the mediation room. And by doing that, you're actually fostering ongoing agitation, aggravation, rather than collaboration and cooperation. And so it's shifting the words that we use. And so I do a lot of training around that in terms of helping lawyers and lawyer mediators shift their language, because we're not in the courtroom. That's why we're doing mediation, is to bring resolution.
Yes, and actually, I'm right with you on doing trainings for attorneys, but what I find is it's hard to get them on board, because it's like mediation, I'm just trying to settle this, bring these parties together, but you still are bringing in that legal mindset. And I find that that's a very hard thing to shift.
Yeah. Well, I would say even, in my 5 or 6 years of training professionals throughout the US and Canada, that not everybody who develops the skills as a mediator chooses to mediate because they have a difficulty of taking off their legal hat, or even their HR hat, human resources. They're so used to approaching things in terms of representing the company as opposed to protecting the rights of the people, that they are very challenged in making that transition. And so having a knowledge of mediation, whether or not you mediate, is still very powerful. And but recognize that just because you're trained doesn't mean therefore you are, because it takes a shift in mindset.
Oh, that couldn't be stated better. That is so true, that it's not just the legal, it's HR, it's in other avenues that you could say you have that mediator hat, but it's really having the mediator lens, and as you said earlier, words, right? Being able to use those words appropriately. Let me ask you too, Deborah, and you don't have to answer this if you don't, but if you were stripped of your credentials and you're just yourself, you know, at the end of the day, what do you want to be known for? Whether it's family-wise, whether it's in the workplace, but I would imagine that you're somebody who would be very similar in both places. I don't think there's a big difference to who you are, right? And so what do you want to be known for? And I don't mean known to the world as a gold medalist kind of thing. Just known from inside.
Yeah. Well, that's a very powerful, reflective question. Yeah, I think, you know, I'll share with you, I guess, a testimonial that I was just given recently by Richard Lutringer, and he's big into the family business and mediation and consultant and an extensive international business background. So I just was fortunate enough to celebrate my 10-year anniversary under my current business.
I saw that. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So getting to 10 years, particularly with the last year and a half being COVID, I thought that was pretty good time to celebrate, you know.
Yes.
But Richard commented that, you know, we'd met each other several years ago, and I was really honored by his words in that he said, you know, he said that I always made people feel that they were at the center of my attention, and that I was truly present with them. You know, and I really, really, you know, appreciated that came across. And so I do want people to feel that they are heard when they're with me, and that and what they say and what they feel and what's important to them matters. And I think that's why I do a lot of focus on how you show up matters, you know, and you know, who are you, you know, and what's important to you, and how do you want to show up? How do you want to influence, impact, be remembered by other people? Because as Maya Angelou says, it's people seldom remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a beautiful thing to be remembered for. When your name rolls off someone's tongue, it's how you made them feel, not exactly what you did. And
Yeah.
I think that's you can't ask for anything more than that. You really.
Well, I hope I live up to that.
I think you already are. And I think that's one of the things that really had me gravitate towards you, was this openness, was this ability to, like, that is somebody I'd like to get to talk to, right? Not only because, you know, your credentials and whatnot and what you do, but it's how you show up. Like you were saying, it was how you show up on the internet, because I would have never crossed paths with you had we not been on other Zoom things together, which I'm so appreciative for. But my path would not have crossed with yours. But even through technology, we can still resonate with people. Absolutely. And so I felt very much that your way of being, even on a Zoom, resonated with me. And so you know, I think we're more powerful than we believe, right?
Well, you know, I have to say, you know, well, two things is that another one of my colleagues, River Easter, again, was very kind in her words to me. And she said, you know, we were both at a speaker trainer event, and as she said, you know, Deborah just came across in a way that I had to meet her. I had to get to know this person. And so she's one of the few people I still stay in touch with from several years ago. And so that was very powerful. But the other thing I wanted to say with that, as you've already acknowledged with Zoom, is that whenever people say, well, it's just not very personal, you know, I don't feel connected. And it's like, I'm sorry, I don't get that, because to me, we can connect just as powerfully here than anything. So, you know, it's really, you know, again, how you show up.
It is. And, you know, the beauty of having Zoom, or I'd rather do this than be on a phone call, because I get to see your eyes. I get to see you smile. I really get to hear your voice, and I get all of somebody. And I really have appreciated that. And I've really appreciated the time you've taken here today with me to be able to let other people see why I resonated with you, and hopefully they will too. And I will leave your details at the end, so that when people go on, they can contact you. And can you just leave your contact information? Just say it one more time so people can get in touch with you, Deborah.
Sure. Well, I think the best way to get in touch with me is actually going to my website, relationships-at-work.com. And because there's a contact me place, but they can also visit the three steps to mindset shift assessments. And then also, if they're interested in my podcast, and I hope to have you as a guest there too sometime soon,
Yes.
2022. But it's all about decoding the conflict mindset. And so I bring in, professionals and subject matter experts in different walks of life, particularly around mediation, leadership, to, how do they approach people and conflict and differences?
And what's the name of that podcast, Deborah? What's the name of your podcast?
Sure, it's called Decoding the Conflict Mindset.
Awesome. And that's on that's a podcast. Is that a weekly or monthly?
Monthly. Mm-hmm.
Monthly. Okay, decode. I'll put that in the details as well. Yeah. And I cannot thank you enough for coming on today and just being so open and informative. And let me say how you show up really is influential in a very gracious way. And I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you so much, Colleen. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And we will be back in touch for sure. So everybody find Dr. Debra Dupree. I'll put her information in the details below. Please check out her website, and you'll also check out her podcast, and I will also put that below. So again, thank you, Deborah, and we'll be in touch soon.
Great. Thank you, Colleen.
Okay. Bye.